Tutors, mentors, and the city with your host.com.
The City Tutors presents
Tutors, mentors, and the city
with your host.com.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Kevin.com Brown, and welcome to Tutors, Mentors, in the City. And please help me welcome our guest for this episode, Miss Sheryl Smikle. Give it up for Sheryl, everybody. Yay! Hello, Sheryl. How are you?
Kevin, I am well. It's Friday. How are you?
I'm doing quite well. So let's get down to the questions, okay?
Absolutely.
As you may or may not know, I don't do any research to prepare for these interviews, okay? I get to know you as our viewers are getting to know you. But I will say this, when I saw your name, Sheryl Smikle, I didn't expect you. Right? So that name has altered all the questions. Every question I had prepared for my first question, I'm balling it up and throwing it out the window. I'm just going to ask you about that name right now, right?
Right.
Tell us more about Smikle. Where does that name come from? How'd you get that name?
Right. Well, obviously it was my father's name, Aubrey Smikle, and his father, Aubrey Smikle Sr., and they really came literally from Jamaica. My grandfather was one of several brothers, and they split up. One went to Jamaica, Kingston, the other went to Panama, and the other brother went to the UK. So Smikle is really of Scottish German origin. That's where it comes from. It means, I looked it up. It means something dealing with the strength. It has a militaristic meaning, warrior, fierce, defender, something to that effect.
Really? Okay. Very nice. Okay, so you can trace your origins back to the islands of Jamaica.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I recently became interested in my genealogy.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a grandfather, a great grandfather, my mother's mother, who I remember. Her father was born a slave in South Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
And he was freed when he was 3 years old.
Wow. Now,
I can't trace anything beyond that. That we know there was a slave master. We know the slave master's name. So that's where the history of my lineage stops.
Well, it actually doesn't stop. Howard University probably has the most extensive genealogy service.
Where did you say?
Howard University.
Oh, okay.
And so if you reach out to them, I'm sure you can go back even further. I have known about them and have had several friends in the academy who have done so. And that information has propelled them to do a lot of traveling to the places of origin. And I have finally come to terms with my decision that I'm going to do it in 2023 because I would like to know more. There was a time when I didn't want to know, but as I mature, I find that I'm more curious.
Okay, so how far back do you think you could go? Your father's from Jamaica.
Right.
Do you have grandparents? And great-grandparents back there? Do y'all know that story?
Yeah, on my father's side, I have been to Kingston. I have seen my great-grandparents. I saw their grave sites. They all lived to be over 100, and they're buried in the Blue Mountains. I believe I know I can because I have the book. I can go back I have the receipts, as the young people say. I have the actual signature and age of my grandfather when he came through Ellis Island.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's a beautiful story. So I went really far back. Just the name, just to address the name. But let's move forward a little bit. So where were you born?
Well, I was born in what is now known as the South Bronx. It was not the South Bronx when I was born. In fact, those projects, as they were called, were pristine, garden adorned. places of nuclear families called St. Mary's projects. And there were really a cluster of projects in that area between 149th Street and 156th Street and Westchester Avenue, et cetera. I was there till I was about 14. And my father got the big job. And we moved down to the east side of Manhattan. And I spent, I was turning 15 2 months after we moved down there. So from 15 to 27, that's where I lived. And then when I turned 27, I moved to the Upper West Side and was there until probably 29, 30. And then I moved to Brooklyn, a place I said I would never move. Very glad I did. I was there for 8 years. I lived in Fort Greene. It was really a renaissance then. My neighbors was Smikle, and he was just coming out of NYU, and the She's Gotta Have It people were in the neighborhood. So it was a really good time. Gentrification was happening in Brooklyn. I lived on South Oxford Street. My street was a historical landmark. We had a lot of houses that were really representative of nice decor, but also period houses. So I'm a native New Yorker, born and raised, educated, went to Bronx Science, Hunter, Vassar, and Fordham. So I'm very much a native daughter.
Wow, Sheryl. I grew up in Mott Haven Projects in the South Bronx. And I spent many a day at St. Mary's Gym.
Yes.
Trying to learn to swim.
Yes.
So I know, it's almost the same neighborhood, right?
Yes.
But and I went to Brooklyn Tech.
Very nice.
Yes,
that was around the corner from me.
Yes, it was. And I did some events at the South Oxford Tennis Club.
Very nice.
And Brooklyn Tech, for viewers, there were 3 specialized high schools, and Brooklyn Tech, Bronx Science, and Stuyvesant.
Correct.
That you had to take a specialized test to get into.
An IQ test until they were sued. It was an IQ test.
That was an IQ test? That's what we took?
Yes, it was.
I did not know that. I thought it was, I was just told it was an entrance exam. I didn't know what kind of test.
Yes, it was based on Stanford Binet, who really developed the IQ test. So if you took the test up until about 1970, your score was your IQ.
Okay. So we both born in the South Bronx, so we have a lot of similar to our story. Except you moved on up. You said your father got the big job.
Yes.
To move to a deluxe apartment on the east side, on the west side.
That's exactly right. In fact, that show was starting that summer, the summer of 75, and it was filmed 2 doors down.
Wow. Okay. So, coming from the South Bronx, I'm imagining public school.
I was bused to school. I was bused to District 10, which was a very progressive Jewish neighborhood. It was off of Kingsbridge Road. And so that I stayed in that district. I was bused to school from 2nd grade through junior high school, which I would have been 15 because I went to Bronx Science as a sophomore. Okay,
so you had access to knowledge in ways that typically in our community, that access didn't really exist. As a matter of fact, me growing up in District 7, in Mott Haven Projects, I literally was like one of either the smartest or the second smartest, like on paper, kid in my grade. And a handful of us went to Brooklyn Tech. But from that community, the stories weren't great. There wasn't the opportunity. So you have special opportunity. I wasn't the only one. There actually were a number of us that were part of this program. And some of us went to Queens. Some of us, the parents denied the opportunity. And I still speak to those people. They're still a little bent out of shape about that, even though everyone that I grew up with went to college.
Everyone and in some of those instances, their mothers and fathers were college grads. So it was a time in which there were a lot of strong foundations during that time. I am talking about the before civil rights, right? So, when the Civil Rights Act was passed, I was in elementary school. So there were people, most of these people were from the South, came up here for better opportunities, and they really were very focused on upward mobility, the family, and education. Now, those that were not bused, who stayed in the neighborhood, have master's degrees and PhDs. Now, was there another side to that coin? Yes, there were. There were people who went to top schools who got caught up during the summers when they came home and they didn't graduate, or they lost their lives because they were trying to straddle two worlds. Right? Many of the families that I grew up with, they all left and moved to the Upper Bronx, Gun Hill Road, Co-op City, Moshula Parkway, Tracy Towers. We were the only family that moved downtown.
Ah, yes. And so we have so many similarities. Now, all of this being said, so you said you went to Vassar, and you got a bachelor's degree there. And then you went to Fordham.
I went to Hunter for my master's.
Okay, went to Hunter for your master's, and
to Fordham for my PhD.
And then Fordham for your PhD. Okay, so let's unpack that a little bit. Bachelor's degree in what?
Well, I don't have a bachelor's degree since I went to a Seven Sisters school, which is a counterpart to the male Ivy Leagues. I have an AB, and that is what those schools get. Those are degrees based on Socrates and Plato's curriculum, and they are considered advanced undergraduate studies. So, people who graduated from, Harvard, Princeton, Yale, Smith, Vassar, Barnard will have, that designation of AB. So my degree is considered an honors undergraduate degree, and it was in Hispanic studies. So it was a multidisciplinary major, which was really looking at literature through the lens of sociology, linguistics, and history.
Wow. Okay. So from the AB, master's degree.
Right. So, I believe in New York City schools, I believe that we have some of the finest higher educational institutions in the world. And Hunter happened to be in the neighborhood, and I hadn't applied for graduate school because I was actually in a BA MA 4-year program. I didn't finish the MA. I came in as a sophomore at Vassar due to my AP credit. I was really pushing myself, and I wanted to see, what my bandwidth was. It wasn't for the master's in 3 years with the bachelor. So I was sort of I was going adrift. So I just went back to my department and I said, I thought I was going to get my master's here. I'm not, obviously. I didn't apply to grad school. What do you suggest? And she said, oh, well, there's an experimental master's at Hunter. They're only taking 7 people. I think they probably have all the spots. Go get your transcript. It'll be unofficial, but go get it. I'll make a call. By the time I got the transcript, came back, she says, guess what? I said, what? She said, you're the 7th person. And you'll have a fellowship and you'll go to Hunter. And it was the best thing ever, because Hunter is an applied knowledge institution. Of course, it's renowned for its focus on education and social work. And it really is a laboratory for a lot of innovation and creativity. So these 7 handpicked people in an unapproved course of study, which I wasn't worried about. I knew that they would get state certification, but it was being the pilot group for a master's in English as a second language, which was really applied linguistics. And so it was really, learning how to build curriculum. My focus was on adult learners. So I was really looking at second language acquisition, which made sense that I was a second language learner and majored in Spanish, and understanding how to add on English for professional people who are coming here from foreign places and need to show English proficiency so that they can be gainfully employed in the areas in which they have course of study and credentials. And since we may not recognize them, they would need to take our own exams in those fields to be considered viable candidates. So it was I had, excellent professors. In fact, Columbia used to come over and watch those classes because they didn't have TESOL yet. So they were looking at what Hunter was doing. So it was a wonderful time. It was superbly put together, and everything I knew and know about adult learning and education and curriculum development, I got from Hunter.
Okay, so let's since we for our viewers, we are the City Tutors. We provide free tutoring and mentoring to typically underserved communities, and we mainly focus on the CUNY system. Mm-hmm. So our founders graduate from City College. I'm a graduate from City College. Chief Program Success Manager. We all from City College, but we're all, in the CUNY family. So when you said you had a fellowship, in case a young undergrad is watching this episode, can you break down what a fellowship looks like?
A fellowship is really what they call a scholarship at the higher ed, at the master's level, right? And so what it is a grant. I don't have to pay it back. And it is meant to supplement my existence while I am involved in full-time study, which I was a full-time student. And it is something that the college provided to me based on my academic GPA. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So I had not applied for most fellowships you apply for. I didn't apply for anything. I spoke to my chair. She made a phone call. They did all the paperwork. I just showed up.
Right. It was a powerful phone call. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay. So you complete your master's at Hunter, and then you go to.
So I complete while I was working on my master's at Hunter, because it was applied knowledge, I waited the first year. First of all, I had to take the undergraduate ed credits. I didn't have enough. So I had to take 4 courses in education that ate up the first semester. And then I started the master's program the second semester. But I found that, it fit me well. The rigor of the program was such that it was a different kind of weight than Vassar had been. So I actually had been making calls to the Department of Education while I was an undergrad at Vassar. And so once I, came home, I said, okay, I'm going to need a job. So I actually became a New York public school teacher my second year of full-time study. And at that time, you were able to pick your schools, right? So I knew the head of personnel. And we had been talking back and forth, and I said, I'm going to pick my school. I have the grades, and I'm going to tell you where I want to work. When he finally met me and saw my transcript, he said, I said, okay, so I want Hunter Elementary School because I can just walk across the street. That'll be great. And so I did that for a year. And then after that, I said, okay, so now I want Stuyvesant. I did that for a year. I taught Spanish there. And he says, well, where else now? He says, Chinatown really needs you. I said, I understand that. I said, and I understand because of my background in ESL, that would be great. I said, but I think I want to go to the South Bronx. And I said, I think I want to try younger students because I was 7 through 12. I actually went younger than that. So I went to Roberto Clemente in the Bronx, and I taught 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th English as a second language. It was wonderful. I couldn't do a heavy dose of that, but I wanted to have that experience. So while I'm working as a New York City teacher, and then ultimately I wound up at Art and Design. And that school was a vocational school, but those students really were vocational because that was their passion, but they had academic abilities and they had academic capabilities. And I really enjoyed that. And in every instance, except for Roberto Clemente, I was teaching Spanish. I was either teaching advanced Spanish, Spanish literature, or introduction to Spanish 1. But I was also, we're talking about 3 years now, I'm moonlighting because I'm a little bored. I felt that, my education was about 50 grand and I wanted to show my parents a return on their investment. So I started moonlighting, teaching college to adults at night. And I absolutely loved it. And I taught a lot of adults from Latin America and from Europe who came with, their hearts and minds ready for freedom here and really wanting to contribute their skills and knowledge here. And what was keeping them back was the fluency in the language. And so I helped them. I taught a number of programs within Hudson County Community College's ESL program and decided, there's got to be a way for me to do this outside of the classroom in a corporate environment. And it turned out to be so. Ex-teachers went into something called corporate learning, and computers were not a thing then. I just went to the library, looked up where they go. It was in financial services, cold called. I was excellent at cold calling, obviously, because I had been talking to the head of the board, head of personnel. So I cold called and talked myself into a job at Marsh & McLennan, starting as a trainer, corporate trainer. And I have pretty much been in L&D since.
L&D?
Learning and development.
Okay. So I have to ask you, what attracted you to Spanish, what connected you to that?
Well, first it was, it's family connection. Clearly, I knew, of the Panama connection, of my grandfather's brother going to Panama, and that is the first language there. And then on my mother's side, she had a sister who was a polyglot. She was fluent in Italian, French, and Spanish, and she was nearby, and I interacted with her often, and I heard Spanish. And of all the languages, I really liked Spanish. And so I said, I think I can do that. And so I picked that.
I wish I had your story. I'm in a master's program at City College now. And in order to get your degree, you have to either take a Spanish class or pass the Spanish proficiency test. Mm-hmm. I'm on a 27-day streak in Duolingo trying to brush up on my Spanish so I can take that test, pass that translation test, rather than taking the class. But in my mind, I grew up around in my neighborhood in Mahaven Projects, there were Spanish people all around me. My best friends were Puerto Rican, and they taught me the curse words and they taught me the street words. But I didn't learn the vernacular. But I couldn't pick it up. I sure couldn't pick it up to choose to be an instructor for it like you did. So kudos to you.
Thank you. Well, that reading language requirement, I had that too. I picked French when I was at Hunter, right? I wasn't happy about it, but I picked it. I said, well, there's going to be some interference. But I would also recommend that you look at Babbel, BABBEL.com, and see if the two of them, between Duolingo and Babbel, how you do. I would also see if you can get online El País, which is the country, which is a prominent newspaper from Spain, because the beautiful thing about Spanish is that the spelling of it is very similar to the spelling of words in English. So, class is C-L-A-S-S, but clase, C-L-A-S-E. So a lot of the they're not faux amis, which we call false friends. They really are, very similar, So I would rely on that. Like what it looks like to you, it probably is, and probably means the same.
Okay, you said Babbel.com, taking that down. And what was the second thing you named?
Yes, El País, which is E-L, and then the second word is P-A-I-S. There's an accent over the I. But that is a very prominent Spanish paper out of Madrid, Spain, because the Spanish that you're probably being tested on is Castilian Spanish, and it is spoken in Europe. The other Latin American countries speak regional Spanish, and it's a derivative. It is a language of its own, but it is not Castilian.
Okay, well, thank you. You just gave me a English, a Spanish is a second language lesson. I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Good luck. Yeah, so good luck. And what is your master's in?
It's called Study of the Americas, is Interdisciplinary Studies.
Oh, I love interdisciplinary. Lovely. Good for you.
Well, thank you, because I don't know what it is. Like people try to ask me what it is, and I can't really explain it. My bachelor's was in Black Studies.
Right.
And I'm really woke right now, right? I had to take 30 credits of Black Studies last year.
Yes.
Because I dropped out in the 80s, came back,
yes.
had 121 credits. My major was gone.
Yes.
So I had to take 30 credits of a major, and someone directed me to Black Studies.
Yes.
Okay, so I learned all this information about my people, our people. And it changed my mind. It blew my mind. Incredible journey. And I loved it so much, I decided to continue. Mm-hmm. And but my school, City College, doesn't have a Black Studies or an Africana Studies master's degree. Mm-hmm. So the closest thing to it is this interdisciplinary studies, because I can pick like 9 credits of electives where I can take classes in any of the CUNYs, any of the 25 CUNYs, mm-hmm. to make it sort of a Black Studies, interdisciplinary studies thing.
Yeah, so you're really going to learn different frameworks and different lenses. Good for you.
Well, I'm learning it, and it's fascinating, right? I haven't figured out my most practical use for it yet, but I'm learning about Jamaica and Grenada and Cuba and colonialism and you know, I'm learning about these things that as a kid from PS49, I wasn't bused to school. PS49 was a couple blocks away. And even though I was in the SP classes, there's a lot of stuff I didn't learn or didn't, you know, whatever. So I'm getting it now, and I'm learning about a lot of cultures that I was totally unfamiliar with. So it takes me a minute. Well,
you know, that background translates nicely into the DE&I space, diversity, equity, and inclusion, either one, two, or all of them. So I think there's plenty to look into with that background.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. The thing that for me, I'm a stand-up comic. Mm-hmm. I've been a stand-up comic for about, you know, almost 25 years.
Wow, that's great.
I had a very successful career, which allowed me to retire early.
Yes.
And gives me the freedom to either stay home and lay in bed, continue doing stand-up, or go back to school. So I went back to school.
That is so wonderful.
Yes.
Well, then you have to write a book about that.
Well, you know, I feel like I'm being prepped for that, but I know it has enhanced my comedy. I know learning about all this book learning, as I would say, on the comedy stage, has definitely expanded my horizon and expanded my vocabulary and helped me, you know, deliver my messages more, you know, accurately. But I'll tell you what, I've worked as a stand-up comic. I've worked with a lot of big stars. I've worked with some of the biggest stars on the planet, biggest stars in the world. And I got sick of them. I got sick of celebrities, right? Of our so-called celebrities. Over these past few years, the way society's designed, it's people like you, the unsung heroes, the PhDs, the educated men and women that are on the ground floor, paying it forward, moving this engine along. So when I hear your story, especially you were a little girl grew up a few blocks away from where I grew up, from where my family grew up, and to hear your story and that you're a PhD, I'm so impressed by you. Like you should be on the cover of People magazine. You should be, you know, you should be going on world tours, and you might be doing that. But I'm just saying,
yes,
your story is so heroic to me. I'm so impressed by you.
Well, I appreciate that. You know, I like to be behind the scenes. I like to elevate people. My strength is really elevating people and giving them, you know, I could probably go into life coaching. I thought about it. And it's not so pressing now, but that's pretty much what I do. And my focus actually is on Black men. I have tremendous success with helping Black men get on track and realize their potential and do what they need to do. And that was by chance, right? I wasn't, when I've had a very good corporate career, excellent corporate career, and I've had an excellent higher ed career. I've been a college dean, and it was during that time that I was able to really focus on Black men. They tend to be scarce in higher ed, as you know. And so I intuitively felt not that Black women didn't need the support, but that Black men needed it more. And Black women were getting it, quite frankly, in the higher ed circles. We do dominate the classroom. So I do think that, we get our fair share. But I really wanted to help Black men persist and to get that piece of paper.
Well,
so I've done very well in that space.
Let me tell you something. As a Black man, I feel like you've helped me already, right? I felt, as you were speaking, I felt like you knew me without even knowing me, right? and now that you articulate the where your skill set, where your superpowers actually lie, I'm like, yeah, I see that. I feel it.
Yeah, I'm very happy about that.
Yes. Now, a couple quick questions. I'm gonna unpack a couple of things you said. Did you grow up with any siblings? I'm an only child. I'm an introvert. Okay, I can relate, but I'm not an only child. I'm a middle child. Now, you said you were in a program and you used the word, I think you said wavering. Something happened and you knew that wasn't working out. When you hit that moment, were you deliberate in your decisions? Did you have to? I'm tying it to when you said, your parents' return on their investment, right? Did you feel, how did you feel when you hit that moment? Well, I had never, at that point, I had never failed at anything. I had the Midas touch academically. If I said I was going to get an X grade, it was going to happen. If I said I was going to do X, it was going to happen. So to have my first failure was devastating. Because school had been my anchor. It was my North Star. So to say that I was coming in to Vassar and not coming out with 2 degrees, I had announced that. I was intentional. I was on my way. And to realize that, as an undergrad at Vassar, you write a thesis and you have a comps, and it's a verbal comp. So, you have to do all of that first, and then you have to then write the master's. So it took a lot out of me to write the comps and to write the thesis and do the comps. I got honors in both. That took a lot out of me. I underestimated just how much, if you allow the process to take you to the outcomes that it wants, it takes a lot out of you to do that. So I really ran out of steam. Right. Really? I ran out of steam. So, my parents came. They probably, in my dorm, I had a very nice dorm. I was an upperclassman, of course. They stayed with me maybe a couple weeks till I, accepted the fact that it wasn't going to happen. And so what I was allowed to do is kind of stay on campus and be a woman of leisure until it was time for the next class to graduate. So while they were doing what they're doing, I'm sitting under the tree, I'm, going here, going there. So, at the end of the day, it didn't stop me. I came out, got the master's anyway. So, it wasn't something that prevented me from getting back on the horse. I got back on the horse pretty quickly. Okay, so you hit a moment like that. Now, about our mentoring arm. I don't know if you're involved in the mentorship arm of City Tutors. I know you're involved in the tutoring arm, right? It's the opposite. I'm involved in the mentoring and not the tutoring. Okay, so great. What was the best advice you got during those moments, during that time where you ran into this obstacle?
I mean, my parents just said it's not important. It doesn't take away from the fact that you're still smart and you've done tremendously, and you can still. The opportunity is not lost. The world is still your oyster, and
Did that
you were the
surprise you?
one. No, because they always said to me that I could do whatever I want to do and be whatever I want to be. I wanted for me. I wanted glory. That was a glory moment. And my parents said that's not necessary. You don't need that. If that's the path you want, you still have many avenues open. I graduated. I came into college at 16. I mean, so there was a lot that I had already done,
Right.
and so you continue to want more and more. And why do you need that? You don't really need to complete a goal in that way. Just complete the goal.
Now, looking back, where do you think that desire for glory came from? Where do you think that sparked from?
I just think I've always been intrinsically motivated. My parents just said to me, get an education and get as much as you can. How I did it was really up to me. So I think it just came from me. I just said, oh, they have a BA MA program. I could do that. Oh, they say 4 or 5. Oh, I want to do it in 4. So it's just I'm very competitive. So it's just, intrinsically, I went to Bronx Science, where, our GPAs were split to the hundredth of a decimal point. So I'm very competitive, and I compete. In high school, I competed against others. When I got to Vassar, I was competing against myself.
Right. Okay. Okay. So, now you finish there. You get your master's from Vassar or
No,
your
I get
PhD?
my AB from Vassar. I get my master's from Hunter. I go 9 years on the master's, working in corporate America at some of the top Fortune 50 companies. I reached the executive ranks in each one of those companies where I worked. And then after I felt the master's had pretty much run its course, I didn't have any more rabbits to pull out of the hat. I said, well, I want to be able to have flexibility, to be able to come out of corporate and come back when I feel like it. And so my PhD was paid by my company. My department funded it. And so I got the PhD.
That's what I have to do. I have to go work for a company, get somebody to pay for this, get somebody to pay for this PhD.
Hmm.
Now, when you took your skills to the corporate world,
Hmm.
and you did, what were you doing? Like, and you know what?
Well,
Yeah, go ahead.
I was, corporations spend more than $1 billion and is spent in the L&D space. And in financial services, I worked on Wall Street my entire career. There is a lot of money that's spent in professional development. So I wasn't on the leadership management development track. I was very good at technical and complex ideas. So I started out as an IT trainer for 8 years. I worked at several brokerage firms that have all disappeared, but they were white glove firms, names that you would recognize. Understanding that I could really interpret complex ideas, I then moved into the legal field. And so I worked with attorneys, and they interpret the law and I enforce the law. And that enforcement is called compliance. So I developed an expertise in financial services around anti-money laundering. I am known in that globally for prevention and detection of money laundering in financial institutions, and how to build processes and programs to prevent that, and how to instruct employees from the lowest ranks to the executive ranks of how to avoid risks in those areas. So that's what I did. And I traveled
Wow.
around the world to do that.
Wow. Okay, so you worked on Wall Street. I just watched this documentary on the legendary, the infamous Bernie Madoff,
Hmm.
and how he was being investigated and they weren't discovering and whatever.
Hmm.
Do you have a take on that
Well, I
coming from
think
your
Ponzi
background?
schemes, when you're down on Wall Street, There's some very smart people. This is about profits. There's some very smart people. And understanding the financial markets, part of it is, what you've been exposed to in your family, right? And some of it, so a lot of the Ponzi schemes, this is about, the darker side of generational wealth. But there are some of color, there are two in particular, who are just real smart, and they have a real business head, and they figure it out, and they're willing to go to great lengths, because it's all on what's on paper. It's all in the documentation. That's really what it's all about. I mean, I was annoyed with Bernie because there were a lot of institutions, Vassar included, that lost money, right? I mean, if you can tell the right story on paper, a lot of people are going to go with you. I mean, there were, the Yankees got hurt by it. There was just a lot of people that he was able to hoodwink, right? Because people didn't check them like they should. So it's unfortunate, and including his, his sons. His sons paid a high price as well.
Yeah. Watching the documentary, and I watched it a couple of weeks ago, right? And I don't know. I was flipping around Netflix. I don't know what directed me to it. Nobody said watch it, but it was just, hey, you know what? Let me turn on something. And I watched it, and it was so close to home, and it was so close to the areas you're talking about right now. But whatever he had to do what he did for decades was incredible. It was incredible.
It was an enterprise. I mean, you have to really understand how to do financial reporting, how to create dummy reports. I mean, it takes a lot of work, and he was very, very, very smart. Okay.
Yes.
There's no question about it.
Yes.
And he was determined.
Now, so what do you do now?
I'm in HR. I'm in human resources, and my role, I design the technical risk management programs for underwriters for the largest insurance firm in the world. So I am the one that determines the strategy of what they will learn, how they will learn it, how we will assess them, what money they will get or not get. That's what I do.
Okay, that sounds powerful. You are so impressive.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm not the only one, though. There's plenty. There's plenty out there. There's plenty out there. I work with them. There's plenty out there.
Yes. Yes. Okay. So now moving forward, you sounded like you were so blessed with the parents. The supportive parents, so blessed. So many of us have grown up so many people from where we come from grow up in households where going to college is not the thing. Getting a job, getting a check, bringing home a check is the thing. And following your dreams is not the thing, and there's so many pitfalls, so many forks in the road. So you were very lucky, very blessed to have the parents that you had. Outside of your parents, who were your mentors?
Well, my mentors didn't necessarily come from within my discipline. So, my mentors came from people who were doing the work in the community. I think of two in particular. One created the nonprofit that teaches English to people for free, that used the space at Hunter College to do that. And when we had to do our student teaching, we did it through her program. I was fascinated by that. She was a Hunter grad. She had a master's in bilingual education, created a nonprofit, went to Hunter and said, listen, if you have student teachers that have to fulfill their student teaching hours in these various disciplines, they can do that at our program. And she had a vibrant program. It ran for about 12 years, and it was really quite enriching. So she absolutely was someone that we didn't really talk about my career, but I observed how she ran hers. Then I had another dear friend whom I met I used to work for Stanley Kaplan. That's a whole nother discussion, but I worked for the Stanley Kaplan from about 10th grade through post-undergrad. And I learned a lot from Stanley Kaplan. I learned how to break the code of standardized tests. I understood the industry of test prep, which he created while he was a student at City College. So I really admired Stanley. Then I had another mentor who created a nonprofit that focused on elevating men and women through a rites of passage program that really focused on Afrocentric values. It was supported by the church that she was on the board of, and she sort of straddled the fence between nonprofit and corporate. She sat on a couple of corporate boards and was well connected. Um, and so I was very intrigued by the way she navigated both worlds. And to this day, I navigate both the academic and the corporate world in much the same way. So, and then of course, the people that I worked with at the company where I learned everything that I know, which was American Express. All of those people were incredibly smart, but incredibly focused on people, and allowed me to hone my skills with little supervision and a lot of freedom, and enabled me to pursue my educational pursuits on their dime.
Well, that's one of the things that fascinates me so much about you, because typically when I do these interviews, and I've done about 35 or 40 of them now since we came up with the idea of doing these podcasts. Gary Rifkin, our executive director, our fearless leader. I suggested to him, hey, we should do a podcast, not knowing if he liked the idea, not knowing how people would receive it, not knowing how the interviews would go, but it's turning out incredible, right? But with that, typically when I speak to accomplished people like yourself and I ask about the mentors, they received their mentorship with, this is advice my mentor gave me. But you seem like you just observe amazing people doing amazing things, and you receive it without the Q&A, without the sit down and the shake, without the I'm gonna shake you till you understand it moment.
Because I was reading about that on my own, right? I'm a student of career development and career navigation and managing your career. I read that in the background. So I don't need to ask them those things. I just need to watch them in action.
Now there's a lesson in that. There's a lesson in that, right? For anybody watching this interview, because a lot of young people ask a lot of questions, and there's nothing wrong with questions. Don't get me wrong, right? The only bad question is the question you don't ask. But you are introducing a whole nother technique, right? We have two eyes and one mouth. Watch, right? Two ears and one mouth. Listen, and take this. Pay attention. The answers will come. But yeah, really impressive. Really impressive.
Yeah, so I really enjoyed that. And I had relationships, sometimes, and many times, mentorships are very finite. They're like projects. There's a beginning, middle, and end. But my mentorships are relationships. They extend. They turn into relationships. I mean, I still speak to my former boss from American Express and his boss. I was friends. I'm still friends with my mentor from Hunter College, and I was friends with my nonprofit mentor until she passed. So they watch me grow, and I watch them grow, and they continue to do different things, and I watch how they pivot.
As you were talking about your friends, I started thinking about your homegirls. Do you have homegirls that you went to elementary school with, the junior high? Do you have them still in your life?
I had one. She passed away. I do keep in touch with a couple people from St. Mary's that I grew up with. But, as an introvert, I keep my circle small. So probably the people that I interact with the most were people that I met at Vassar. There are 3 of them. They're in Atlanta where I'm at. We've known each other 40 plus years. So yeah.
Absolutely. As you were talking also, and I asked about the homegirls, I remembered I still go to my same barber when I was a kid. My very first barber. I
Wow.
went to him. I went to him a couple of weeks ago because I grew my beard over winter break. His barbershop's on Cypress Avenue at like 137th Street, between 137th and 138th. So that's a few blocks from where you grew up. When I went to him, his father, it was called Famous Barbershop. His father was the barber, and he was the kid that swept up the hair. And when his father taught him to cut, I was literally one of his first customers.
Wow.
When my mother used to cut my hair when I was a kid, but when she finally gave me money to go to her barber, it was him and me. And that was 40 years ago. And I'm bald, so I didn't use them much for a long time. But when I grew the beard, I was like, yo, you got to give me the beard hookup. You got to shape up my beard. But I was in the old neighborhood. But, and it's coming up. Have you been to the neighborhood lately?
I went probably in the early aughts just to show my daughter. It was a very quick tour because she was not interested. Very quick. I did go back in 1980 when one of my friends passed away. So I bet it seems like I had 20-year intervals. But since the early aughts, I have not been back, no.
Well, the neighborhood has changed in a sense. A lot of new construction, particularly during the pandemic. So there's that area that like it below the highway, and it looks like the Village, right? There's condos over there, there's co-ops over there, apartments for rent for $4,000, $5,000 a month type. You know, it's very, very bistros and antique shops. It's changed a lot.
Well, you know what's interesting? While I haven't gone to the Bronx, when I moved to Westchester, I always came to Harlem. So the last time I was in Harlem was 2 weeks ago. So I do come to Harlem. So I've been going to Harlem all along, and I've seen the change in Harlem.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
I've seen the change in Harlem. And I have a lot of friends from high school that live in Harlem.
Right. And for me, I moved on up. I'm up, let me see, Parkchester area. I don't know if you remember.
I do remember. I remember when they built Parkchester.
Yes. I remember that too. You know, we might be the same age. I don't know.
I don't think so.
Yes, okay. Or I might be a lot older than you. One of the two, right?
No, I think you're a little younger. I think you're younger.
I don't know. But either way, but I had when I did my acting thing, I made a little bit of money, and I said I don't want to blow my money, and I bought a 3-family house up in the Bronx. And it sat there for a minute, and then they opened up Metro North stops along the 6 train. And then all the property values have doubled now.
That's great. Good for you.
And then some. But so you know, the Bronx has its stories, but it's you know, we still holding on, we still plugging away. I'm up by Orchard Beach now.
Okay, yeah. Now I've been to City Island quite a bit when I do.
Okay. Then you passed me. You passed me to get there. But you know, you have an incredible story. What's the best advice you have to offer to? It's funny you mentioned your daughter, right? I have 2 daughters. That I remember being disappointed when my oldest was not a boy. But it turned out to be the greatest thing that ever happened to me. But I know the feeling of, why you bring him here? Let's get out of here. I know that feeling. But what's the best advice you can offer to your daughter or young people, young mentee?
Well, you know, I stay around young people because they keep you young, right? And so I have a lot of young friends. And what I've told them and what I've told my daughter, and it's what I've done, is know thyself. It starts with self-awareness. You must be incredibly self-aware. You must be incredibly self-aware so that when you're given constructive feedback at the job, or you're given feedback in your personal life, that you are not injured by that, you need to check the source. Who's it coming from? What is the motive? And is it true? And you will only know it's true if you know yourself. Now, if
Mm.
it's an incident and you can recall the incident and you see their point of view, then make amends. But do not let other people define your path. And if it is that you're the only one going down the path, so much the better. Keep trailing, keep paving that road.
Now, a lot of people, in response to that advice, a lot of young people don't know themselves. What do you do when you don't know yourself and you just convinced you don't know yourself?
Well, I think that you have to write down your thoughts in a journal. I think a journal helps you to find out who you are. And
Mm.
sometimes you don't have a lot to say, but whatever you're thinking, you should write it down or you should speak it into the phone. But you should also take time to be still. A lot of people don't take time to be still, young people in particular, is to take time and be still so that you can listen to your inner voice. You have to be trained to listen to your inner voice, and you have to follow your intuition. And because the intuition is real power, and it's probably the purest power you'll have because it's unaffected by context and situation.
Okay. Appreciate those gems you just dropped. So my closing question. We talked about a lot of things. I took you back to Jamaica and the origin of your name and elementary school and high school, college, the corporate world, teaching, PhD. What did we leave out?
Well, I think we left out that, I'm incredibly optimistic. The world to me is always half full, and there's always a silver lining, and I can always find it. I mean, my father used to say things back to me that I would say to him. And when the world gives you lemons, you make lemonade. You have to be incredibly creative and innovative. You need to pull on those inner gifts. Everybody is creative. Everybody is innovative. And so I just don't allow what seems on the surface to be a closed door to stay closed.
Okay. And on that note, I'm going to take this time to thank you so
Thank you.
much. Thank you
Been
for
my
joining
pleasure.
us for this hour. It was very enlightening, and I see why you're so accomplished, and I appreciate you joining us for this hour.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for what you do and continue to do it.
Well, thank you. And on that note, I will bid you adieu. All right. Bye-bye. Thank you
Bye.
again.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.